Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Hope you all are doing good and enjoying the classes. Anyways, we continue our series of lectures, research methodology, research and publication ethics, in which we are in module B, research and publication ethics. So we are in the first part, means research, formulation and design. So here we have completed the research problem part, that is the first part. Defining and formulating the research problem, selecting the problem, necessity of defining the problem. In the last two classes, we dealt in good details, the importance of literature review in defining the problem, literature review, what is it and what it is not, primary and secondary sources, means information about the different types of literatures available, reviews, treatises, monograph, patents, web as a source, searching the web, critical literature review, which is important, and identify gap areas from literature review. Okay, so today we will do we'll move on to the next part, means development of working hypothesis for your research. And then it's a small part, and then we'll initiate the research design part, which is very important. In research design, we will cover today the basic principles and need of research design. And then from the next class, we'll go ahead with features of good design, important concepts related to research design, and so on and so forth. Okay. So let us just recap what we did last class. In last class, we covered how to write a literature review. Okay, isn't it? So we read in the literature review, we took two classes. First class, we did all what is about literature review, it's why it is necessary and the purpose, the benefits, and so on. What are the different types of sources? In the second class, means in the last class, what we did is what is a literature review, what is not a literature review, points to remember before starting to write a literature review. So what are the main points that you should keep in mind before starting the literature review? Means making separate folders based on themes, collecting the sources in different folders and organizing it, and so on and so forth. Strategies for writing the literature review. We understood that, means what should be the strategies. And then finally we came into the very important part, that is organizing the literature review. All of you have covered literature reviews, but before writing, you have to organize it into three parts mainly, means how whatever citations or sources you have, how we will organize in different parts. So there were main three parts. First is the introduction, which is very small and precise. We told you can keep it up to 2 pages in a literature review article. And for your thesis, you can make it similar. And then the main part, that is the body. So the body we discussed in 3 ways, how you can organize the body of the literature, which is the main and the biggest part in 3 different ways. Either you can do it in a chronological fashion, means how your topic got evolved from the beginning till today, and what are the strategies or the challenges awaiting in future generation, or you can do it in terms of other aspects. So we discuss all those 3 parts, and then we did some case studies as well. So hope, and it was very nice. Means I felt very nice in giving the previous literature, means writing, how to write a literature review. I have also started to write a literature review, as I told you, and I hope you all have started. So we move on to the next part of our research stages. So in research stages, a research process, which is there in the next page. So in research stages, we studied in the introduction classes previously that what are the stages, formulating the research problem that we have studied in details, extensive literature survey, that also we have covered, and hopefully you all have done an extensive literature survey. Then come the third stage, that is developing the hypothesis, the working hypothesis. In research process, we define a research problem, isn't it? And then review and concepts, review previous research findings, and then we come to formulate the hypothesis. Okay. So what is how to formulate the research hypothesis? So that we will do in this class. This is a flow chart in which we have covered 1, 2, and we are starting with the third part. So developing the working hypothesis of your research. So development of working hypothesis. After extensive literature survey, so you have already done an extensive literature survey, researchers should propose a working hypothesis. Okay, so which is what? What is a working hypothesis? Which is basically a tentative assumption. So as you know from the definition of hypothesis, that is, it's not a theory, but an assumption. For what purpose? A tentative assumption made in order to draw out and test its logical or empirical consequences. Okay, so it's a tentative assumption which you will propose based on your research problem and the literature review. So, okay, in the review, this suggests this is a trend which is followed in my subject, and I propose this kind of trend with certain modification which I want to pursue in during my course of research. Okay. And then after this, once you propose this assumption, okay, this is a tentative assumption, you start out your research design and do research that means research process, further research process to test the logical or empirical consequences of your assumption. Means you want to prove it or to your working hypothesis which you have proposed. Why it is important? Because it is particularly important since they provide the focal point of research. So as you can understand from that whatever hypothesis you will propose, that becomes the focus around which your research is moving about. Okay. So if you have proposed a hypothesis that, say for some chemical reaction, that, okay, I propose that as a function of temperature, concentration, and scaling up, these will be the consequences to the research reaction rates. Okay, just an assumption means which you have made. And then you start doing the experiments, or somebody who's doing theory, they start doing the theoretical work in details and find out, okay, whether the outcome is matching with your assumption. So you rotate, means your research is revolved around whatever you have proposed in your working hypothesis. So it becomes the focal point of your research, and it is very important, or what you call is extremely relevant to your research. They also affect the manner in which tests must be conducted. So once you propose the research hypothesis, it affects the manner in which tests must be conducted. Means you will do tests during your research process, for the research process after proposing the hypothesis, working hypothesis. And then what are the tests you will conduct will depend on the working hypothesis, what the assumption or the proposal you have made. So it is mentioned, they also affect the manner in which tests must be conducted in the analysis of data and indirectly the quality of data which is required for analysis. Okay. So even the quality of the data which you will derive during your research process will depend upon what hypothesis you have made. Okay. Say, for example, I propose that, okay, for a material, certain material, these kind of certain morphological changes is expected upon temperature treatment, means calcination. I'm doing a case study for material scientists. So what if you propose, okay, if we keep for, then you will do the experiment. So you propose that, okay, this is material A, and material A when subjected to temperature treatment at a very high temperature, say 1000 degrees Celsius for certain hours, you get certain kind of sintering phenomena, means agglomeration phenomena. And material B, which is a modification of A by dopant or composite, well, you say suppose a dopant which is resisting your sintering. Okay, so I always take the example of iron oxide, say chromium, which is doped on iron oxide. So you propose that, okay, from the past literature, I expect that the chromium will sit in the grain boundaries and will prevent its sintering or agglomeration phenomena. So you do the test, and after the test, you carry out the data, means the data collection. Okay, you do sintering experiments for 100 hours, and then you collect the morphological features of both A and B and compare, and you find really it is sticking to your hypothesis that B is getting less agglomerated than A. So the quality of the data means how you will prepare the morphology. If you propose that A is a nanoparticle, so you have to do a exotic morphological analysis, mean microstructural analysis with the help of microscopy, isn't it? So the quality of the data will also depend on the working hypothesis which you have made. So what are the features of the hypothesis? The hypothesis should be very specific and limited to the piece of research in hand because it has to be tested. So this is the difference between the research problem and your working hypothesis. So the research problem was broad. This is the title which you proposed. The research problem was broader in context. But when you come to research hypothesis, you may propose multiple hypotheses. So those hypotheses are very specific. Okay, as I told you, the sintering phenomena of two materials. So those are very specific because you have to conduct tests based on your hypothesis, right? So it is not broad, instead it is very specific and limited piece of research. The role of hypothesis is to guide the researcher by delimiting the area of research and keep him on the right track. So what is the role of this hypothesis, working hypothesis? It keeps you on the right track. You do not deviate. So for the material A and B, which I told you, are say suppose multifunctional. Okay, so it shows the sintering characteristics. It can act as a good anti-sintering agent, or it has some other like catalytic properties. It has some, say, dielectric properties. But since your hypothesis is only on scintillating characteristics, so you will focus or limit your research in that area. Okay, so you do not tend to debate, or you keep it in right track, keeps you in right track. Or if you have proposed, okay, with your hypothesis that I will investigate both the sintering phenomena as well as the dielectric phenomena, okay, you restrict yourself to two. So this, you will not go into investigating its catalytic properties. So this is what I meant to say. This is what is the role of hypothesis, is keep you focused and on right track. It sharpens his thinking and focuses attention on the more important facets of the problem. Okay. So as you collect the data and investigate and try to correlate with your hypothesis, working hypothesis, and your thinking process improves and you focus your attention. It also indicates the type of data required and the type of methods of data analysis to be used. So once you propose the research hypothesis, what are the types of methods or what are the types of data analysis to be done is already defined. Okay, so you stick to that. How does one go about developing the working hypothesis? Now, how we will propose it? So you have defined the problem, you have done an extensive literature survey. How you will propose your working hypothesis? The answer is by using the following approach. Discussion with colleagues and experts about the problem is origin, objectives, and seeking a solution. Means dispersed with expertise, as we have discussed during problem selection as well. The examination of data and records means here now means the literature survey becomes crucial. If available, considering the problem for possible trends, peculiarities, and other clues. Review of similar studies in the area or of studies on similar problem. Exploratory personal investigation, which involves original field interviews on a limited scale with interested parties and individuals with a view to secure greater insight into the practical aspects of the problem. So these are the points by which you can go about developing your working hypothesis. So how we will propose your working hypothesis. So as we did last time, means during research problems, almost similar. Discussion with your colleagues and experts, supervisors, literature survey, review of similar studies in that area, and personal investigation. This is an additional point. So this is how we will propose the working hypothesis. Thus, working hypothesis arise as a result of a priori thinking about the subject. You have not investigated, but previously you were doing it by thought process and literature review and discussion with peers and seniors. Examination of the available data and material, including related studies and the council of experts and interested parties. Okay. So if your research is driven by an applied, means industry, then interested parties have to take consultation with the industry, what they need for proposing the working hypothesis, and literature, a proper analysis of the literature, and discussion with the experts in the field. Okay, this is how we propose the working hypothesis. Working hypotheses are more useful when stated in precise and clearly defined terms. Okay. Now, this is an exception which is mentioned. It may as well as be remembered, occasionally we may encounter a problem where we do not need the working hypothesis, especially in the case of exploratory or formulative research, which do not aim at testing the hypothesis. But as a general rule, specification of working hypothesis is another basic step of research process in most research problems. So this is what sometimes it may not be required. It is mentioned for exploratory researches. Okay. So we conclude what is working hypothesis by defining it. How we will, what are the features of that, the role of the hypothesis, how you will propose the working hypothesis, and the conclusion, what we expect out of working hypothesis. Okay. Then we go to the next research stage. So we have, among the research stages, we have covered formulating the research problem, extensive literature survey, developing the hypothesis. See, we have covered all these three. Now we go on to preparing the research design, which is a major aspect of your research. So you design what you will research in future course of time. So research design. So what is research design? Nothing. Research design is the preparation of the design of the research product is properly known as research design. Okay. So basically what it is formal decisions regarding what, where, when, how much, by what means. So these are the questions: what, where, when, how much, and by what means concerning an inquiry or a research study constitute a research design. Another textbook problem is a definition is given. A research design is the arrangement of conditions for collection and analysis of data in a manner that aims to combine relevance to the research purpose with economy in procedure. In fact, the research design is the conceptual structure within which research is conducted. Research design constitutes the blueprint for the collection, measurement, and analysis of data. As such, the design includes an outline of what the researcher will do from writing the hypothesis and operational implication to the final analysis of data. So these are the typical definitions, textbook definitions of research design. But basically what it is, in the research stages, it is the fourth stage, where you propose the problem, research problem, did an extensive literature survey, propose the research hypothesis, and then you propose the blueprint for your research. So blueprint means, so generally for building, before starting construction of a building, so what, there are the civil engineers and the architects. What they will do? They will make a blueprint of what they will build. So you will build your thesis, you will build your research in next 4 or 5 years. What you will build? If you have a blueprint a priori, previously, which is well defined, then you will follow according to the blueprint, right? So during the before construction of the building, as I told you, the architects will propose a blueprint where they will say, okay, these are the area, these are the outside area where I will not touch. Okay, and this is the main zone where I will cover and build this many number of rooms. Well, these are the ventilations and so on, the details. If it is well designed, the engineer who will carry out, it will be very simple for him. Similarly, what you will do research in your future time, if you have a clear blueprint, understanding, and well defined, then what will happen? What you will do one after another, it becomes much easier. Okay, whatever results you get, whether it matches the hypothesis or not is different, but you should have a well-defined blueprint or a research design. That is, what is that? The design answers the few questions. So few decisions. So decisions are what are they? Meaning of research design means some decisions regarding what, where, when, how much, by what means concerning an inquiry or a research study constitute. That is with respect to the following. What is the study about? What I'm studying about? Okay, that should be very clear to you. So you have to answer this question. And the questions, once you answer, you make a blueprint. Okay, these are the points I will cover during my study. As I told you during my previous slides, okay, I will do the scintillating characteristics for a long-term study, just for not a thesis, but for one particular research design for, say, for a particular problem, one article, one paper. So I will study about it. So you know what you have to do. You will do a long-term high temperature experiment for the materials which you are interested in. And then after taking out, you have to do some characterizations regarding morphology, structure, and delineate how the microstructure, the structure, and the local structure is changing as a function of temperature treatment that you have to do. So you should be clear what is your study about. Okay, you can be biology, engineering, physics, chemistry, anything, materials. Then what is the question you should answer? Why is this study being made? So during the sintering problem that I told you, why I will study these materials A, B, and why I will want to look materials like B, which have less sintering phenomena than A. Well, these are having certain applications, as you did during our introduction classes. These are applied research because I will make, because there are materials which are required for high temperature applications who can resist sintering, right, or densification at high temperature. Okay, so this is why the application is made. Yeah? And so study is made for applications in high temperature related materials. Where will the study be carried out? This is the next question. So that should be clear. If you do not have a place where there is a furnace, you cannot put your materials at those temperature. Or if you do not have a place where you can carry out the morphological analysis of the samples, means microscopy, then you cannot carry out the study. Then you have, if you do not have, no problem, but you can collaborate, right? You have to identify where you can carry out the study, right? The places where you can go and carry out the study. So where will the study be carried out? So at prior, you talk with them and establish a formal collaborative layout so that your research is not hindered. I'm sure everybody helps a PhD student who is doing a PhD, so there will not be a problem. What type of data is required? Okay, so definitely when you are doing such thermal studies, you will not generally try to do the electrochemical characteristics of those material A and B, for which you are investigating the thermal properties. Because why? Because we need not need those type of data. We need the type of data which is required for a thermal phenomena. Similarly, the electrochemical people will say, okay, I will restrict my data to these fields. So this is how you should answer the question, what type of data is required? Where can the required data be found? Okay. What periods of time will the study include? Very important, because economics of time will also be a constraint for your research. So if your data collection takes 2-3 years, it is not possible. Say, for example, this thermal study, okay, we'll do a study for 100 hours, but the material will be applied somewhere for, say, 1 lakh hours. But can you taste it for 1 lakh hours in the furnace? It is not possible, because such furnaces you do not have, which will continue to run for such hours, and also it takes enormous amount of time and energy. So you will extrapolate, right? You will restrict yourself for 100 hours, and then you try to extrapolate it. This is what periods of time will the study be? Okay, you have to define it. And if required, you can extend to certain amount of time. So reasonable time means economics of time will also be there. What will the sample design? Okay, as I told you, you are doing the thermal properties of A, and you are doping and preparing B, C, D, doping, say suppose A, B, C, D, E materials. You cannot do everything in the world. You cannot cover all the compositions. So what you do in A, you do 1%, 2%, 5%, 10%, 20%, isn't it? Not 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, and go on till 100%. No, it will not be same. So you have to define what will be the sample design with your literature survey, your discussion with your experts in the field. They will be able to design, okay, in certain cases, small percentage can be effective. In certain cases, you need 10% to show any results. So I'm giving you some case studies, just one example. If you know in your research what will be the sample design, you have to define it. Okay. What techniques of data collection will be used? That anyway you have to define. As I told you, for these kind of studies, thermal sintering, you have to have furnace where you will heat the samples, and then after that, if you have a high temperature XRD, high temp means then microscopic studies, local structure studies, all those techniques you have to use, because you have to have the data with you to prove your hypothesis. So what techniques you will use? You have to include that in your research design. Finally, how will the data be analyzed? Okay. So whether you will be using any software to analyze the data, or you will analyze it manually. So everything, how will data be analyzed has to be defined. In what style will the report be prepared? And then how will you prepare your report? In the form of articles or patents, as means what we discuss in the sources, or industrial report if we're doing in work with the industry. And what, as I did as we studied in organization, we have to organize the report also in steps. Keeping in view the above stated design decisions, so these decisions you have to make a priori during your research design. One may split the overall research design into following parts. So since you are designing it, so what parts it will cover? The sampling design deals with the methods of selecting items to be observed for a given study. So you have to make that design. The observational design relates to the conditions under which observations are to be made. The statistical design concerned with the question of how many items are to be observed and how the information data gathered are to be analyzed. The operational design deals with the techniques by which the procedures specified in the sampling, statistical, and observational design can be carried out. Okay. So you will have a fair idea of the sampling design, how many samples, the time observational design, conditions under which the observations are to be, statistical design, how many items, how much time or how much information you need. This is statistics and the operational, the techniques which you will use, isn't it? Okay, all these, so the research design will cover all these parts. It means you have to do design for each and every part of your research, means the sample, the observation, the statistics, and the operation. The important features of a research design is given as follows. It is a plan. So basically, as I told you, the building has a plan or a blueprint. So this research design is your plan of research or a blueprint. And what will the blueprint say? So building blueprint gives you an idea how many rooms, how many flats in each floor, how much is the outer area, how many parking. So those specifications are provided in the blueprint. But what your blueprint or what your plan contains? It specifies the sources and types of information relevant to your research problem. Okay. What it is a strategy specifying which approach will be used for gathering and analyzing the data. Okay. And it, in addition to this, it also includes a time and cost budget, since most studies are done under these two constraints. So you have two constraints. So you will have to plan it according to the time available and also whatever budget you have for your research. Okay. So these are the important features of a research design. So basically what it is, it's a plan that specifies the sources and types of information relevant to the research problems. So you have to make a complete plan regarding this. You have to create a strategy which will specify the approach for gathering and analyzing the data. What are the techniques you will use? It's under this four. Under what observation conditions you will use the techniques? How we will analyze the data? All these has to be predefined. Okay. And also, you have to consider during the design stages how much time and how much money you can invest. Okay. For your, because these two are the main constraints for your research. Means you cannot go for a 10-year program, right? So you have to finish a quick timeline, whatever you want to do. So that has to be defined during a research design stage. In brief, research design must at least contain what it should contain. It should contain a clear statement of the research problem. So your research design should contain the following: a clear statement of the research problem. So statements should be there. Procedures and techniques to be used for gathering information. So it will also contain the procedures and the techniques. So if it is experimental research, what are the experimental procedures? What are the techniques? Say for, as I told you, for that sintering characteristic, you will use what techniques? You will need a thermal furnace, you will need an XRD, if possible, a temperature dependent XRD, exhaust and Zanes if possible for local structure determination, for microstructures, SCM, TEM, and so on. For gathering the information, what techniques you will use? So that has to be defined. Your research design has to be made. What procedure you will use and what technique you use for gathering the information. The population to be studied. Okay, how many materials you will study? Isn't it? So that has to be defined a priori. Well, you can add and subtract at a later stage, but based on your results which you are getting. But at the beginning, the research design stage, you have to define the populations. Methods to be used in processing and analyzing the data. This is also important because in analyzing and processing data, you sometimes use various softwares and so on. So those knowledge and methods we will use has to be defined. So these are the main contents of your research design. So it should have a clear statement of the research problem, procedures and techniques to be used for gathering the information to justify the problem or the research hypothesis, the populations to be studied, how many materials or how many experiments of investigations you will make, methods to be used in processing and analyzing the data. Okay, whatever data you have gathered, how you will analyze it, in the methods you use to process it. Okay, so that to reach a logical conclusion. These are the contents of your research design, and all of these should be contained in your design. What is the need? Why you need a research design? Okay, some researcher may say, no, I have proposed the hypothesis, now I start doing experiments or I start doing theory. I will not need a research design, but it is required. Why? Because it facilitates the smooth sailing of various research operations. If you prepare a research design, you know, okay, after this, no, it will be a very smooth sailing, a smooth sailing, and you know that. Thereby making research as efficient as possible, yielding maximal information with minimal expenditure of effort, time, and money. Okay. Research design stands for advanced planning of methods to be adopted for collecting the relevant data and the techniques to be used in their analysis, keeping in view the objective of the research and availability of time and money. So as I told you, time and money, we are adding another problem, that is staff. So if that is also a matter of concern, but may not be so much. Preparation of the research design should be done with great care, as any error in it may upset the entire project. Okay, you not miss something, or you should not add some technique which is irrelevant to your area of research and you deviate from your subject. Research design, in fact, has a great bearing on the reliability of the results arrived, and as such constitutes the firm foundation of the entire structure of the research work. Okay, it gives the foundation. So as the blueprint gives the foundation of the building. So initially when you start doing research, it gives a firm foundation for the entire structure of the research. Okay. You minimal expenditure of time and money, smoothly sailing research you can enjoy if you have defined it in the proper way in advance. Few additional points that we should remember regarding the research design. What are they? In absence of a well-proposed research design, many researchers do not serve the purpose for which they are undertaken. So this is how, if you are trying to investigate the thermal properties, if somebody lands up with one of my peers, my friends is doing electrochemical property, let us go and take this and investigate it. It may not serve the purpose. It can lead to deviations or misleading conclusions. So if you have a prior research design, you will stick to it and try to undertake whatever is you have proposed in your research design. It is therefore imperative that an efficient and appropriate design must be prepared before starting the research operations. The design helps researcher to organize his idea in form whereby it will be possible for him to look for flaws and inadequacies. Okay, flaws and inadequacies in your design, it might be there. Everybody's work is there, but you can identify if you have a proper research design and whatever you are doing expected. Such a design can even be given to others for their comments and critical evaluation. Okay, so remember, whatever research design you are making, you give it to others for their comments and critical evaluation, as you did during problem statement, as you did during your working hypothesis. So whatever research design you have proposed or planned, if you give it to the supervisor, they can provide their comments with a critical evaluation so that the flaws and inadequacies, if any, can be rectified in an advanced stage. Okay, because in the absence of such a course of action, it will be difficult for the critic to provide a comprehensive review of the proposed study. So these are the assignments. How does a researcher go about developing working hypothesis? So one question only on working hypothesis. What is the need for research design? And what are the important features of a research design? Okay, so these are the important features of a research design, these three. These are the need for the research design and working hypothesis we have already covered. Okay, so thank you for attending the class and going through the research methodology course. We will speak in details about research design in more details. What is a good research design and so on from the next class, and hope you are able to understand. If you have any questions, all of you probably have your email ID. You can mention me. If you have not understood any points, you can email me, and so that I can include it in my next classes. If any rectification or if any suggestions or if any queries if you have, or if you want missed something, or if you want some more clarification on any topic. Thank you.